stream starting. And now I have to join my own live stream just to see how it works. And Sunday there too. Of course it is. Well, welcome anyways. Praise God that you still joined despite the fact that it is Sunday. Yeah, some places they're probably asleep. But okay. I have to open Telegram. I forgot about that. So, of course, let's bring up something first. So, this week, I wasn't in Desire of Ages as much as I have been. But that's kind of substituted for the Gospels. And I kind of realized as I was listening to the Gospels, as detailed as Desire of Ages is, because it's a pretty detailed book, right? It's an 800-page book. And of course, there's stuff that Sister White wrote about that it splits off into other books, so like Christ Object Lessons, and I guess also Thoughts from the Mouth of Blessings, right? Usually I tend to just pay more attention to Desire of Ages. I noticed as I was listening to the Gospels, I was just like, not everything that's in the Gospels is even in Desire of Ages. So even though you have an 800-page book talking about the life of Christ, still, when listening to the Gospels, it's just like you're realizing that, like, this aspect isn't mentioned, or she doesn't really go into this aspect. So it's a good thought process to, like, yes, go into Desire of Ages, yes, listen to Desire of Ages, yes, read it, but also pay attention to the Gospels too. Just listening, reading, stuff like that. You get different thoughts. Right? So what I want to focus on today is a subject surrounding John chapter 13, verses 34 and 35, which says, "A new commandment I give unto you, that ye love one another, as I have loved you, that ye also love one another. By this shall all men know that ye are my disciples, if ye have love to one another." So, why is this a new commandment? So, to the chat, why is this a new commandment? What's new about this? As I close my window for fear of the outdoors. What's new about this commandment? It had been forgotten by the Jews. Okay, not quite what I'm looking for. So it seemed as new. Let me pull up what the Apostle John says. Darkness is past. Because there's a point to what you're saying, right? 1 John chapter 2, verses 7 to 8. Which says, "Brethren, I write no new commandment unto you, but an old commandment, which ye had from the beginning. The old commandment is the word which ye have heard from the beginning. Again, a new commandment I write unto you, which thing is true in him and in you, because the darkness is past and the true light now shineth," right? So it appears new, right? Because there is in a sense where darkness passes and something that was always there begins to shine out more, right? And that thing that is shining out more is the commandment to love one another, right? So when Jesus says to love one another as he has loved us, the thought process that I was more looking for is what, Bible Click had put into the room, right? Is that it's the way that Jesus has loved us is the way that we are to love one another, right? What Jesus says about this kind of love, right? Like he said in verse 35, "By this shall all men know that ye are my disciples," right? So, do family members love one another? Yes or no? Is that a normal thing for family members to love one another? Yeah, right? That's a normal thing, right? When you think of friends who like to hang out and stuff like that, it's normal for them to love one another? Yeah, right? That's a pretty normal thing. But the picture that Jesus is painting, right? He's saying that there is a kind of love that he is displaying to his disciples that if we, as the followers of Jesus, display this very same kind of love, this is how other people will know that we are Christians. This is how people will know that we are followers of Jesus. Because there is a kind of love that is displayed by Christ, right? There's a purity to it, a wholesomeness to it, a Christ-likeness, right? But a holiness to it, a godliness to it that is so unlike the world, right? Essentially, human love gets taken and it's not suppressed, but it's made stronger and made to shine out greater than it had shown before, right? And so the point being is when we're looking at Jesus, we want to have this kind of love that Jesus is talking about for one another, right? And it will be so apparent and so clear that other people will just see there is something different about the way that these people are, even with one another, right? So that, like Jesus said, that's how we shall know that, that's how people shall know that we are his disciples, right? John 12:32 says, "And I, if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all men unto me." Now this is a statement that has many meanings, right? Many meanings, because it is necessarily pointing out to the fact that, you know, the death that Jesus is going to have to die for our sins, right? So that aspect is absolutely pointed out here in this verse. But it's also pointing out this truth in another aspect, that if we lift Jesus up, right? If we talk about him, if we put him forward, if we look upon him, it is by him, that we will be able to draw men together, right? That's an interesting aspect to me, even in the aspect of loving one another, right? Because it is the more love that we have for Jesus that also helps us to have greater love for one another, right? That we draw closer to one another because we're also drawing closer to Christ if we know Christ, right? So it's easy to look at a place, or let's consider, for example, a church body that is doing this again. Then you have a group B Seventh-day Adventist church, where you have people who might have a little bit less knowledge, right? But you could see their unity, you could see their closeness, you could see the community that they share with one another, you could see the love that they have for one another, right? Now, despite the fact that Church A might have a little bit more light, Church B is the one that would be more welcoming, would be the one that people would want to be around, is the one that people would more gravitate to, or should be more willing to gravitate to, right? And it's not that there's something wrong with desiring the truth, right? Because the truth is something we are supposed to desire, it's something that we're supposed to be around. But let me bring this up. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 1 to 3. Because there's an aspect that, as much as truth matters, it still pales in comparison to something else. So, this starts off as saying, "Though I speak with the tongues," that's the languages, "of men and of angels, and have not charity, I am become as sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal." So, this is hypothetical in the way that Paul is speaking of, right? He can't speak with all the languages of men and of angels, but he's giving a hypothetical. He's like, look, even if I could speak every single language known on earth, and I could actually speak to angels, right? If I don't have love, I am become a sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. I'm just like an instrument that just randomly makes noise, right? There's no musicality to what I'm doing. It's just random. It's just happening, right? Now, in music, for example, right? Music is based on the idea of repetition. There has to be some sort of rhythm to music, always. If there is none, it does not sound like music. It sounds like random noise, and it can get really annoying, right? There's no coherence to it, right? So it's just, you just have a random sounding brass or a random cymbal just going on. It's not really conveying anything, right? Except essentially chaos, right? And so that chaos, that's not That's not going to be beneficial to helping you or to helping others. But let's move forward. It says, and though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains and have not charity, I am nothing. So now he's saying, look, we can understand prophecy greater than anyone else on planet Earth. Let me say that again. We can understand prophecy greater than anyone else on planet Earth. So take Seventh-day Adventist Church, Church A, can understand prophecy greater than anybody else. Not only that, you can have all the mysteries, you can have that understanding of all the mysteries more than any other church on earth. And you can have a greater understanding and have the greatest depth of knowledge more than any church on earth. You can even have people that have the greatest faith. They just go, you know what? If I pray, I know God is going to answer this. I know that these mountains are going to move for sure. Though they have all faith so that they could remove mountains. But you don't have charity. You don't have love for one another and for people outside the church, right? But if you don't have love, then you're nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, and have not charity, it profiteth me nothing. So you can even do actions that appear good, right? And they are, in their outward sense, objectively good, right? If you give your goods to help feed the poor, that is objectively a good thing outwardly, right? And even somebody can give their body to be burned, right? In the sense where you could try to save, you might try to save somebody's life, right? Or you just might be willing to lay down your life for something or a cause. But the point is that if you don't have love, it doesn't profit you anything. And this is the point. This is the point. That when it comes to being a Christian, as much as having truth matters, as much as having prophecy matters, right? Because understand, 1 Corinthians 13 isn't saying those other things don't matter. There's nothing wrong with wanting to learn different languages. There's nothing wrong with wanting to gain more knowledge, get a greater understanding of mysteries. There's nothing wrong with giving your goods to feed the poor, right? Etc., right? But the point being is that despite those things, yes, desire those things, but there is one point that is most important that we as Christians cannot forget, and it is the love that we are to have for one another, for Jesus, for God, for one another, and for those outside in the world. Because it doesn't matter. Once you go past that point where you ignore that point, right? Once you get those other points, but you ignore love, your faith isn't where Jesus would desire it to be. And quite the contrary, right? Individuals in Church A, right, for example, what ends up happening is you become so overly concerned with words or the idea of doctrine, right? Things like that. That what ends up happening is brothers and sisters start fighting each other over the smallest points, over things that don't matter. Because you're so concerned with getting the knowledge of the truth, which you should desire, but you're doing it to the exclusion of the love that you should have for one another. To be able to understand and have the capacity to see, look, sometimes as brothers and sisters, we're going to disagree. And that's okay. That's all there is to it. Right? Whether it be in this thing or in that thing, sometimes we're going to disagree. But the point is that the most important aspect is having that love for one another and for others in this world, right? But definitely that love for one another that Jesus has for us. That's what Jesus says is the marker that determines how we know whether we are his disciples or not. Right? And I know this is a bit longer, but that's on purpose. Usually it's kind of shorter. But John chapter 15, verses 12 to 27. This is my commandment, that ye love one another as I have loved you. So this is the standard that is set before us. We see the way that Jesus has loved us, and we therefore need to understand that, or rather, it is stated it is taught how Jesus has loved us. We need to gain the knowledge of how Jesus has loved us so that we can replicate that same sort of love. Right? Greater love hath no man than this. Then what? That a man lay down his life for his friends. Right? And one thing that comes to mind with this thought process, right? Willing to die for somebody, you have to also be willing to live for them as well. Right? Jesus didn't come down, be selfish, do whatever he wanted, ignore all of us, then go, oh yeah, by the way, I'm going to go on the cross for you guys. Right? That's not what happened, right? He gave his life. He didn't just die for us. He lived and then died for us, right? So greater love hath no man than this, that a man laid down his life for his friends. His whole life was laid down for us in the sense of when he was living for us and when he died for us. Ye are my friends if ye do whatsoever I command you. So Jesus looks at us as his friends, right? Henceforth I call you not servants, for the servant knoweth not what his Lord doeth. But I have called you friends, for all things that I have heard of my Father I have made known unto you. Look, Jesus is trying to point out the kind of relationship that he wants with us. He doesn't just want us to think of it as like, well, we're essentially his servants and that's it. He wants there to exist a tender union between him and us, that he can point out to us and that he can command us what to do here and what to do there, but he can also trust us. He can also befriend us. He can also be near to us, to guide us, to love us, right? He also says, ye have not chosen me, right? It's not that I have the greatest wisdom on earth and therefore I chose Jesus, right? Now I know he's talking to his disciples, right? But this is still true, right? Ye have not chosen me, but I have chosen you and ordained you that ye should go and bring forth fruit, and that your fruit should remain. That whatsoever ye shall ask of the Father in my name, he may give it to you, or give it you. These things I command you, that ye love